Hi, everyone. My name is Ben Opapari, and this is the Songwriters on Process podcast. Since 2010, I've been interviewing songwriters about their writing process. And on this podcast, we go deep, deep, deep into the writing process. Far deeper than the usual. Do you start with the lyrics or the music question? By way of background, I have a PhD in English literature, and I'm a prose writer myself. I'm not a songwriter. In fact, I've never written a song in my life. But my goal has always been to treat songwriters the same way that we treat prose writers and poets, just as writers, plain and simple, and have always been interested in the writing process. This is an intelligent conversation between two writers. And on this podcast, like I said, we go deep into the process. We talk about rituals, the seeds of inspiration, the role of movement on the process, writer's block, the revision process, pens, pencils, types of paper, and of course, we talk about books. You can find all the archived interviews on the Songwriters on Podcast website and across all streaming platforms. And with that, let's dive into this week's episode. And today on the podcast, it's Mika Tenenbaum and Matt Loon of Magdalena Bay. I love this band. The new album, Imaginal Disc, is out August 23rd on Mob and Pop Records. It is fantastic. If you've ever seen any videos by the band, and if you haven't, you need to check them out. They really go hand in hand with the music. They place incredible importance on the visual appeal of the band if you've seen their press photos, but watch the videos also. It should come as no surprise that they are inspired by everything around them, sonically, visually, everything. Tenenbaum told me that at least at the time of the podcast, she had 2002 voice memos of ideas on her phone. 2002. I'm sure it's more now because the interview was last month. She said she gets ideas when she's Swiffering, the Swiffer, the dry mop thing. That act of Swiffering she finds inspiring. And also, I'm glad someone finally said this, the sound that hybrid cars make, that humming, that droning sound that they first make. Mika and Matt told me that they heard the sound one of those hybrid cars made, I think, a few days before we had talked, and found that to be a really nice sound and inspiring sound. So listen, if you have 2002 voice memos on your phone, everything inspires you. And it's no wonder listening to the band's sound or watching the videos. They also told me that TV shows can be inspiring too. And again, the visual element of that, no surprise. So I'm a big fan of this band. I love their music. So this was a lot of fun for me to talk to them. Again, the album is called Imaginal Disc. It's out August 23rd on Mom and Pop Records. Here is my interview with Magdalena Bay. Matt, we'll start with you. Is it important to create every day or just when the mood strikes? I find that artists kind of go back and forth and that. Some kind of feel like it, if you force it, it's derivative, but a lot of people think that, if you talk to prose writers, especially, like butt in the seat, regardless of how bad it is. So Matt, we'll start with you. How do you feel about that?
I mean, it might be important. I definitely don't do it, So I can't say if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I only create when I feel like I want to create or I feel creative. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure my productivity would be through the roof if I sat down every day and wrote, but I don't know. My brain doesn't work like that per se.
But it sounds like you have no desire to even be like that, right? Like, does it ever make you anxious if you feel like after a few days, nothing's coming? What's going on here?
No, I don't know. I don't know if my brain works that way. I think for Mika, probably a little bit more than me, but I think if I am feeling anxious about not creating, then that will probably be enough of a motivating factor for me to get there. But if I'm not feeling anxious, then I'm not gonna, I guess, force it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Mika, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely more anxious than Matt in general, so maybe that's driving me to create more often. But no, I think the way it works, at least for me, is like we do songwriting, but then we also do a lot of like other creative work around our projects. So like right now we've been in this like very deep period of like video creation and video editing. So that ends up taking the foreground. But this past week I'm like getting back into writing. So, and now I've been doing a little bit every day, but it's more in like waves of, every few weeks or however long it takes to get back in that mindset of like wanting to write every day.
Yeah, but I feel like neither of us are very like regimented or like schedule oriented about it. I think it's just when we feel the urge, then we do it. And Mika probably just feels it a little more often than me.
Sure.
So Mika, be honest then, if those ideas aren't coming, are you saying like, Matt, what's the deal? I mean, it's been a few days. Where are the ideas?
No, not at all. I mean, we write together a lot, like something from scratch, but I also love to like start an idea from scratch on my own, whether it's like, just chords or a melody or like a really like loose, like rough beat or like something more developed. So I think it's fun either way. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I work best working off of Mika's ideas. So I like it when, Mika brings something to me and then we can then work off that.
I don't know if I agree, but
you don't agree? I mean,
oh.
it's fine both ways, but I guess I think probably I love when, and for me it's more gratifying to like hear something that Mika has started and that's like has such like a great core idea, and then to like develop that from there and work off of it. But
yeah, I feel like the inverse too.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe we're in this cool situation where it's like, okay, we could either start something together, but it's also very exciting when the other has come up with an idea that sparks like, that possibility.
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested also in when I interview bands who have very like beat driven music. I mean, I think in the really early stages of this site, I had Josh from Phanogram on. And this is like, I think this is honestly like 13 years ago. And I remember he told me that going over covered bridges, the bump, ba-dump, ba-dump, actually gives him ideas for beats.
Isn't that like the Bee Gees were going over the Julia Tuttle in Miami
Jive
and then
talking.
came up? Yeah, Jive Talking.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I do hear that. I mean, I hear, again, I'm a songwriter. I mean, I'm a prose writer, not a songwriter. I can only tell you what other songwriters tell me, but I feel like these may spark some ideas. So, King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, Stu McKenzie, told me that car alarms give him great ideas. And I've heard turn signals. So I guess I'm curious, do you get a lot of ideas from external sounds? I mean, with the type of music that you do, I could imagine maybe hearing something and thinking, wow, like I could see that being a beat.
I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to think if there's any specifics. I know like recently we've been really into the sound of electric cars when they like go in reverse. They have this very artificial, weird droney sounding noise.
It's like gorgeous. I really like the Kia one.
The Kia electric car one.
Beautiful.
Okay, so this is amazing because we have a CRV hybrid.
Yeah.
And my wife and I say the same thing all the time about how it's not just reverse, but I'm so glad you said that because whenever I hear that sound, and I now have to listen to a Kia, but I love that. So how did that happen? Like, did you just hear it and say, wow, how did that happen?
I think we have a neighbor. So like every morning when they're leaving their driveway, we hear it and
it's gorgeous.
It's
but
really, we haven't like utilized it yet.
Anything yet, but it might. But no, I don't think like so far, nothing consciously, but I'm sure those kind of like world sounds are seeping into our creation.
Well, I know Mika said this before, like she feels very inspired when she just goes out into the world and then hears music, like I guess in like a club setting or just in ways that people actually like listen to music. Because when we're stuck at home, it's hard to like think about music being actually enjoyed by people and like how that works. So I think
I so rarely kind of like go out too that it feels very like mystical when I do, and I see people enjoying music and I'm like, wow, that's interesting. That's special.
Do other sounds maybe things that you hear, conversations, uh, inspire you or give you maybe lyrical ideas?
That's a good question.
I think I know. I don't know if it's too personal, but I know like your therapy has inspired.
Yeah, well, yeah, that makes sense, definitely. Because she'll say like really crazy stuff. Yeah. Like really vibey stuff.
Because it's like, what's the school of?
It's like it's pretty interesting. It's like I was born in Argentina and so is my therapist, and there's like a cool kind of like psychoanalysis wave of therapy there. It's like a Lacanian school of psychoanalysis. It's kind of just like regular therapy, but more talking about your dreams and like just way more like poetic takes on things, I think, which I really love as an artist. So yeah, that'll inspire me for sure. Also like movies a lot and TV shows and things. I don't know if so much conversations, like in any conscious way that I could place.
So what about those TV shows and movies? I'd like to explore that. Is it the lines that you hear? Is it the themes? Because I hear that sometimes too.
Yeah, I think it's like the storylines and the characters and the drama, like if we're working on a song that sometimes the music itself kind of like speaks to some sort of narrative arc, and I want to fill in the gaps of that and explain what's happening musically through words, and can draw from a TV show like, for example, Star Trek, TNG, to get some inspiration on what might be going on.
Do you feel also, I mean, I know you're heavy in the video aspect of it too, in the creation. When you're involved in those other artistic endeavors, do you see that as a break from songwriting to kind of like fill the well, or does that also give you song ideas when you're engaged in other creative, things like the visual aspect?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like both, at least for me with songwriting and video work, it all starts so like exciting, and like I think the best part of my favorite part of what we do is the songwriting. Like when we first start an idea and just the possibilities are like endless and it's so awesome. And then the months go on and you're like digging into the details, and first it's like recording vocals, which is so tedious and intense, and then it's like, okay, mixing and mastering, and it starts losing the magic. And I think video stuff is the same way, where like first you come up with a storyboard and it's like, oh my God, this could be anything. And then you have to deal with the
Budgets,
nightmares of production and post, and like always going over budget and like horrible deadlines. And then you want to like go back to songwriting,
right.
like just kind of go back and forth to find those like amazing starting points. Yeah.
So when you're making those videos, then how can I say this? I guess, does that end up, when you're making the videos, does that end up shifting the lyrics maybe? Do you changing the lyrics because of, maybe this is an avenue in the video that we want to explore? We've got to change the lyrics.
Yeah, I think like kind of actually on this record, like it wasn't the case until we were working on Imaginal Disc. And like the first several songs kind of, it just existed within themselves. And then we started thinking about the visuals, and kind of like the videos I was imagining helped inform the lyrics.
Yeah, I think when we write, a lot of times, not simultaneously, but we'll get to a point in the writing where we'll start ideating the visuals, and then I think we'll think about how the arc of the song matches the video, and there might be like some adjustments we make.
Yeah. Not really like to fit the video per se, but like the imagination of that story or of those visuals of the video can help like guide the
writing,
the inspiration for the words. Yeah.
And you're in Miami, is that right?
We're in LA.
You're in LA. Why did I think Miami? I feel like I saw that somewhere.
We're from there. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm not losing my mind. There is, so it's funny. I just had someone on from LA recently. Matt Coma from Winnetka Bowling League. And I was talking about, the city and the environment and what a difference that makes. Do you think that I don't want to make this like does being LA make you prolific, or do you write a lot of songs? But I'm literally curious about the space, the city itself. And because some people write well in the wilderness, others crave that urban the energy and the voices. How important is that to you?
I feel like LA is a weird balance because I feel like, for New York, for example, like there's no escaping the urban environment, and you're sort of constantly exposed to it. In LA, you could get a little bit of both, where we can just, stay in the studio and never leave and be perfectly happy, be able to go outside in our backyard and get
And
our
it's
required sunlight and then go back in and keep writing. So I think that's probably where we thrive the most, but we still have the ability, if we do get, you know, little stir crazy, we can go out and interact with human beings
or
and
go
stuff.
see a movie or something. But yeah, it's just as quiet as you want it to be, and that could be like really quiet.
The number of songwriters, though, I've always said that, they have you're in LA, so they have those buses that go around and, to the stars houses.
Yeah.
The number of, I feel like you could also do that now in upstate New York. The number of songwriters who moved to upstate New York from Brooklyn. Yeah. I mean, they could be a tour bus just dedicated to seeing those. It's crazy how many up there, have moved to those more serene areas and how that makes a big difference. Just the serenity itself, just makes a big difference in the creative process.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, it's like the trope of doing the writing retreat where you like go out to a cabin in the woods and just get inspiration. And that sounds really nice. We haven't done that, I guess.
I feel like we just kind of do that just by virtue of like locking ourselves in and like focusing on songs, and that's when we're in that on that wave.
Yeah.
But no, it does sound nice to go into the wilderness.
Maybe the next one,
yeah,
get that true isolation.
Yeah.
I imagine, I get the feeling you're staying inside. You set the timer, you go outside for 30 minutes, the required amount of sunlight, then come back in. I get the sense of that's how it goes almost.
No timer.
Yeah, we're not very schedule oriented. I think we sort of just follow how we're feeling. And if we're really in the zone and we get stuck inside all day, then I think that's great. But yeah, I don't like holding myself to schedules or timelines or stuff. I think that's probably one of the main reasons I wanted to become an artist in the first place, is not to have to set the alarm in the morning to wake up. So I think it's just like my personality is more suited to that sense of freedom, for sure.
I agree.
Okay, but I would like to try to pin down some kind of ritual if we can. Yeah. So let's start with this. Are you more productive in the morning, afternoon, or evening, or night?
I'd say night. When we're in the creative writing zone, nighttime for sure.
Writing in the morning now.
Now you have
to, just literally this past week, and I really like it because it's just like head empty.
Sorry, we can't pin that
down. Okay, but when you say night, what do we mean by night?
I would say like, at least in the past, it's been like 10 p.m. to 2 a.m.
Yeah, I would say I agree. I think that's like peak, like ideation time.
Mm-hmm.
And then but you mentioned Meek in the morning too. So why did that start to happen? If you were night people, what made you say, morning?
I don't know. I think we've been really busy with a bunch of stuff going into release and touring, and in the morning it's like nothing's like real yet and nothing's happened. So I'm able to just like disconnect a little bit and focus on that. But I do think I like the morning for starting ideas, but I agree with Matt that the night is when we could really dig in and make something cool happen.
I've heard that too. People create in the morning, revise in the evening. Yeah. All those kind of things. Can you write or create for long stretches? Or do you say, okay, let's take a break. We're kind of in a rut and we'll come back and refreshed?
I think it depends how things are going.
Yeah. I mean, if we're in the zone and things are sounding good, then we could go for a while. But obviously you get to those blocks where it's just not working and you need to take a walk or just start fresh in the morning. I mean,
yeah, for us, like if we're ever stuck on something, just going to a park or going on a walk and talking through it has solved like endless like puzzles and conundrums that we've had, just like speaking through what might be going on.
Yeah, it's funny because like when you're at the studio and you're just listening to it, you are so like overexposed to it. But when you take a step back and you just actually like not like intellectualize it, but sort of take the creative project and put it into like a different context, like when you could just talk through what you're actually doing and what you're trying to accomplish and like what needs to happen and what's not working, it's so helpful to rethink things that way.
And you also don't have your tools, so you just can't keep like endlessly
Right.
messing around, like adding things and adding things. You're forced to just like think about it in a more abstract way.
Mhm.
And I think distance is hugely important. I mean, I've always told people the worst time to revise is after you've revised or after you've written. We always need that distance. I mean, I wrote a book that came out actually last month. It's Mark Morton from the metal band Lamb of God is a good friend of mine. We collaborated on his rock memoir that came out about a month ago. And that was a huge amount of work to write that book. But I remember I would keep we had a pretty expensive, well, towards the end, it was crunch time, but I don't think I'd ever look at a chapter. I think the most was like 3 times a day, because the more I looked at it, the closer I was to it, and I would miss things. But any amount of distance helps. And what I found was that if I look at something in the morning, if I finish something in the morning and look at it later that same day, I'm still close to it. Like I still feel like, no, it's still too precious. I wrote it, damn it. I'm not getting rid of it. But I found that if I finish something at night and look at it that next morning, I'm like a new person. It was unbelievable
Totally.
how aggressive I could be in my revision.
Yeah.
But it was incredibly helpful to know that about myself, because it was like, I'm still too close to this now, but at one night's sleep, and I know that these things will be gone. So,
I mean, sometimes for us, it's not even one night. It had to be like a month or months where we'd start an idea and we would like really like go in on it.
You would like basically finish
a whole song and be at the end of that. The next day we'd be like, this sucks. This isn't working. Let's just shelve it. And then literally months later, we'd be going through the old stuff and we'd be like, wait, this is really good. Like now I know what this needs now. What we couldn't figure out before. You just like rethink everything. And I don't know. Yeah. I mean, some things you could know the next morning what it needs, or if it's not working, but sometimes it just needs like maybe your experience changes, your mind develops and stuff, and you can rethink things. But
so you set those things aside not to discard them, but because you'll come back to them later deliberately.
Honestly, no. Initially, it's a discard,
It's
and
an
then
anger.
Yeah, you're like, screw it. It's not worth it.
Yeah.
Let's throw it away. But then, for whatever reason, I don't know why, you end up revisiting.
You should always revisit. We always do that. Yeah.
And then you see something in it that you couldn't see before.
Or like that you could, or you wouldn't have gotten so far with it, but there was something like clouding your mind about it. Yeah. That's my floor.
And TV.
And TV.
Yeah, like there's 2 songs on the new record that were initially like throwaways that we came back months later and figured out what they needed to make them work. Yeah.
So what were you, I'm curious, do you just was it, oh, let's look at this again? And I don't know. I always love to figure out, what was it about? Like what made it click when you realized, oh, actually this is better than we thought it was.
It's so hard to put into words. I don't know. I mean,
I don't remember about That's My Floor. I think it was just fine as it was. We didn't do anything.
No, actually, I do remember. We changed the key of it. Remember?
I think that was like earlier in the process.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think we came back to it and we were like, oh, right, the vocals aren't working because it's just in the wrong range for Mika's voice.
Like we should make it lower so that the mood and the energy has this more like, I don't know, like whatever.
Yeah.
Vibe to it.
And then for other ones, it's like, oh, well, we just need to like start the production on this from ground up. But there is something really great about the core song.
Yeah.
So it just depends. I don't know. I think just having that distance is so important.
So The other thing is, I hear some songwriters tell me that if songs, they distrust the ideas that come to them too quickly. So I've got a quote up here. I've got some author quotes up here on the screen. This is H.L. Mencken said, "The value of writing seems to be in inverse proportion to the ease of writing. Whatever flows freely and bubblingly turns out to be sorry stuff a week later."
I've heard the complete opposite.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like people love to like, oh, this hit was written in 1 minute.
Right. I've heard that story so many times. Like, yeah, this came out in 15 minutes and then, it was perfect. It's like it came to me from God,
I love that when that happens.
I think it's very rare.
Yeah.
Very rare.
So if it happens quickly, do you say that was so fast? We're not going to touch this. There's a reason why it happens so quickly.
I think the benefit of something happening quickly is it prevents you from having the opportunity to overthink it and grind on it and then get into this process that we were talking about before where you get stuck. Because if it all happens in 15 minutes, you just don't have the chance to be like, well, maybe I could do this and this. And so I think those feel the best initially. And probably, I think there is something to be said about it. I mean, I'm not one to prescribe to like rules on songwriting, like, oh, if it comes out quick, it's good. If it takes a month to make, then it's obviously bad. Because I think there are songs that we've really hammered out and we've, went through every single possible variation of it. And then at the end of the day, we love it. And then there are other songs that we wrote in 15 minutes and probably suck, So I don't know.
Yep.
Was the song on the new album that stands out as one that just happened in one take really quickly?
That's a good question.
Huh.
I mean, I guess like something like Killing Time is like the melody just came to you and
Yeah. I mean, and the chords just came to you. I don't even remember.
yeah, the chords were just me jamming and they came and then you sort of sang over the melody and it felt very natural. Yeah.
That was it.
There are other things like, okay, like, oh, what are we going to do for the bridge? Then those details maybe take a little bit longer than 15 minutes, but the core of the song was quick for sure.
Yeah.
So I forgot to ask this earlier. Do you just have, I imagine all your ideas are on your phone, right? Voice memos and things like that.
What's the count?
I'm at 2002 as of unnamed voice memos.
So is there any organization to those at all?
No, it's a nightmare. I don't know. I think at one point on one flight, I didn't have Wi-Fi and I was like, this is the time I need to go through and name these. And I made it through 30 and just fell asleep. It's so boring. And thing is, it's like, they're probably not, if they were great, it's a completed song by now, or I would have like kept working on it.
That's that's what we tell ourselves. If we ever like forget something or we lose something, we're like, well, if it was really good, then we would have remembered it anyway. So
I love that question because I always get the sense of regret when I ask it from songwriters. Like, I know I should. And gosh, I'm trying to think of some good stories. So I had Lauren Mayberry on a couple years ago, and I think she has an Excel spreadsheet of all of her ideas. I know, right?
That's awesome.
That's pretty hardcore. Someone else has an emoji system. The emojis, they have an emoji ranking based on how strong they feel about that ideas. But listen, I've always said the advantage, and it's happened to me too, is that if there is no organization, then you're going to be forced to look through everything, and then that may stimulate. You may see an idea that otherwise you may overlook if you had that ranking.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, because initially you might rank something as like, a total skip, and then you'll never go back and listen to it. But I guess if we did that, we wouldn't have gone back to some of these songs that then sparked something in us. So maybe it's better to reserve judgment.
But I love that Mika, you told me 2002, not 2000. You do have the exact number of how many there are.
We just talked about this yesterday.
I just happened to pull it up, and I was like, it's 2002 in my voice almost. But I mean, like, my ideas on there are literally so rough, and I do think when when I think of something that's just like, a snippet of a melody or a chord progression that I really love, I will like immediately go to the computer and work on it. So
Yeah, and you have artists talk about like I wrote 200 songs for this album and then I picked like the 10 very best ones of those and that's what made it onto the album. But I feel like what are you really calling a song there, right? Because I think for us we might have 20 songs that we consider like written and then we'll pick the best 15 of those. But I think like Mika's saying, only the ones that make it to the at least the production stage are ones that we feel good enough about. So I guess it depends what you consider to be
a pre-screening process.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing when you're writing those lyrics, are you ever a pen and paper person or strictly phone or computer?
It depends, actually.
Oh,
You
nice.
have your notebook.
Yeah, I have a notebook, which is fun. It depends the mood. I think like the phone is cool when it's like coming quick and easy. And if I'm not sure about something, I like to get the paper and just kind of like sketch and like write words and like really think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, when you say sketch, are we talking actually images?
Yeah, like or like doodle or sketch or like just try to generate, something around it.
So is that linear at all on that page, or is there stuff all over the place?
All over the place. Yeah, I try to put it like in stanzas as it gets developed and then, cross things out or like
So
have it makes sense.
Well, you'd be amazed how specific, how deep down the rabbit hole I can get with like this idea exactly. So, okay. So first of all, is it pencil or pen?
I think pen just because there's more pens around.
Yeah, I don't think we have pencils lying around usually.
Yeah.
So color of ink or brand of pen, does that matter?
No, not really.
No. You'd be surprised, the loyalty.
I'm sure, yeah.
It's frightening how specific people have to be.
Yeah.
So the advantage then of the pen I see is that if you cross something out, then you can come back to it.
Yeah.
But the flip side to that is people who erase, they erase because they never want to see that idea again, or when they cross out, they're really going to aggressively cross out so they can't see it. But it sounds like for you, that simple line through it gives you the chance to go back to it if you need to, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, because maybe it was a good idea. And even on my notes app on my phone, I never delete anything. I just like copy paste it to the bottom so I could see like the first ever string of ideas.
Right. You have the graveyard on the bottom of all the.
For sure.
Yeah.
And one more thing with the paper, lined or unlined?
Unlined.
Ooh.
Unlined. And yeah, I think actually the thing I love about pen and paper is like when we're kind of getting to like the end stages of the album, what we like to do is look at all the lyrics and just think of things on a more macro level, like conceptually. Like what is the narrative? Like what is the first song about? What is the last song about? Like what does this all mean? And how is it like interconnected? Like what is the story here? And that will like write out on a psychotic sheet of paper, like covered in words and like lines and arrows. And it looks like serial killer stuff.
Right.
Well, listen, they've done research with students in colleges and found that students who take notes with pen and paper have far greater recall than those who take notes on a computer. So there's research behind, I think it's a different part of the brain that gets stimulated depending on if it's a pen and paper or a computer.
Yep.
Yeah, it feels like there's more like intention for whatever reason behind actually writing it out with the pen.
And I was also having this conversation with someone earlier that I feel like if you go back to those journals or those ideas, a month or even years later, I feel like by seeing that piece of paper, you'll be taken back to that place, maybe nostalgia. But I don't think you're going to get that if you're looking at a screen, right? I mean, I'm not waxing nostalgic, but I do feel like there's more value in, I remember where I was. I remember that feeling I had when I was writing. And sometimes you could actually see it maybe in the print. All right, a couple more questions. I do want to get back to the walking because, and this is, I think, a two-part question. So, and there was an article in the Washington Post about in the past year about why we get our best ideas in the shower. And the reason behind that is that when you're engaged in an activity that requires no conscious thought, that's when the creativity happens. So, I've heard things. I mean, Agatha Christie said the best time to write a book is when you're doing the dishes. So I've heard things like, any repetitive motion, not necessarily walking, but I've heard things like, doing the dishes, folding laundry, taking a shower, gardening, mowing the lawn, like any of those things that require no conscious thought. That's when the eureka ideas happen. So does that often happen? You've ever thought about when those ideas are coming to you?
Yeah, I mean, that happened to me like last week. I was working on a melody and then I was like Swiftering the floor and I like finished it in my mind. And I was like, oh, great, that's way better now. So, yeah, I don't know if it's like, yeah, have we had any like eureka moments like that?
But that's a eureka moment. I mean, you were doing
Yeah, I guess
something that
so. Sure.
totally is. I mean, that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. Like, you're doing something that really should require no brain power. I mean, you're just pushing something.
Yeah.
But I've heard vacuuming, and that's the same thing. I think that's absolutely what it is.
Yeah, I think vacuuming would be too loud because I'm probably trying to hum and hear it. So for me, it's more like a Swiftering situation.
I don't know. I think that tends to be, again, I think there's a reason behind that, but when that activity, it requires no thought.
Yeah.
That's what back to the shower thing. That you're doing something that requires no thought, and that's when the ideas happen. Okay, so the part two of that is the role of motion. We talked about walking, and that's pretty common too. I think driving, of course. David Burns said, I've got this up here. A car is a good place to write lyrics. Driving occupies one part of the brain, freeing up the other.
Mm-hmm.
Now, driving in LA, in all seriousness, I mean, driving on a long stretch of highway, I'd imagine gives you more opportunities for your creativity than on traffic on the 101.
Yeah, I feel like driving in LA, you need full brain power for most of the time because, there's a lot of narrow streets where you have to really be on guard. And then, there's a lot of crazy drivers also. So.
I'm more of what they call a passenger princess.
So yeah, I mean,
but the walking though, well, I mean, with the walking, are you doing that deliberately? Like, let's go out for a walk and work this out?
Yeah, I feel like those are more deliberate problem-solving missions when we go on those walks.
Yeah.
But
I love writing lyrics in the shower too. Like, yeah. And walking I feel like it's like shower for the lyrics, maybe some chores for the melody. And when we're dealing with like big picture, like production or structural or like vocal delivery issues, then we have to take a walk and talk through it together.
I feel like I've had all like any big picture album conceptual ideas I've had has been in the shower, actually.
For real?
Yeah.
Okay. That's awesome.
I love these. I love those specifics of that. See, you said like a half hour ago you have no ritual, but you just told me you had a ritual. So no, but so are there places that you walk? Because again, I think that I could see the place where you walk making a big difference. I think it should be a place of serenity, ideally, right?
Yeah, I think it's always just around the neighborhood, or we'll go to the closest park, right? I mean, I think being around some sort of flora.
Yeah, which is the other nice thing about LA. It's like generally always blue skies and trees and flowers and stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I wrote an article in the Washington Post about 5 years ago. There's a very clear link between even low-level aerobic exercise and creativity, higher order thinking. So what we're talking about, there's actually a scientific basis behind it. So there's a chemical in the brain called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which gets secreted through increased blood flow, which is exercise. So what they did was they put people on a treadmill for 20 minutes at 60% max heart rate, which is not much more than a moderate walk. and gave those people a battery of tests measuring higher order thinking after the treadmill, those people always score higher than people who didn't exercise. And the benefit lasts about 90 minutes post exercise. So there's a lot of research behind that about why, and it's not snake oil science. It's been replicated in the lab. But what they found was that effect gets negated if the exercise involves executive function in itself. So the study done, I think, at Michigan that found that walking in a natural environment is much more effective than an urban environment. Like if you're walking in the streets in New York, you're trying not to get hit by a car.
Right.
So that effect gets completely wiped out. They found that when people who played Wii Fit, that got wiped out because they were involved in thinking as they were exercising.
Yeah.
So it makes total sense what we're talking about, that walking. And so the ideal is 30 minutes at 60%. Again, 60 is not much more than a moderate walk. And so there's research behind that as to why. And I hear that all the time. Like I went out for a run, I went for a hike or walked, I came back and I was flooded with ideas. And that's actually why.
Yeah, I was just watching a REM. I've been like on this REM kick, and I've been watching all these. They have so many documentaries about like their album processes, which is cool. But it was like Michael Stipe. I forget which song he was trying to write lyrics for, but he said he just walked around Atlanta for like a whole day, I think, until he wrote the whole song.
How often do you get to read? I always find that songwriters are voracious readers. There's a pretty clear connection. How often do you get to read, and who do you like? Are you an author person or a genre person?
Yeah, I feel like our reading goes in like, it's sort of like our writing where we'll just have these eras that we'll just be reading book after book, and then dry periods where we just won't read for months. But now Miko's back on her reading kick.
Yeah, I'm reading Game of Thrones, which like I knew that I needed something that was gonna like draw me back into reading. And I've seen the show, and obviously the books are like really entertaining and great. So I was looking for something to like lure me back in. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not an author person. I am a genre person. Like
Yeah, you're on a sci-fi wave.
I've been on a sci-fi wave my whole life, and it's like kind of hard for me to break out of that. So yeah.
Yeah, and I also have my phases. Like, I guess most recently, I was really into nonfiction, like essay writing, either philosophical or political nonfiction essays. I had got like, I don't know, George Orwell's. Just I don't know. There's something about these short form nonfiction writing that was very engaging to me for a while. And then before that, I was like, oh, I need to read all the classics, so I was doing that. And now I just got Ulysses, so I might be back in my classic era. So
Wait, you're going to read Ulysses by James Joyce?
I'm gonna try. Yeah, I'm gonna try.
My good man, I admire you incredibly. So my PhD is in 20th century American theater, so playwrights.
Mhm.
And I
I
have to
just
read
read. Sorry,
No, go ahead.
Who did I read all his plays of?
Sartre.
Yeah, Sartre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We got a
I just
Sartre's
read all that.
playbook.
Yeah.
You're going all in. I mean, Ulysses, wow. I am so impressed because
I haven't. Don't be impressed. I haven't even cracked it open yet.
We've had it for a couple of weeks and he hasn't cracked it open. So let's be real here.
I mean, there's other James Joyce you could go to first that would ease you into that. I mean, that makes Infinite Jest look like a kid's book.
Well, I love the Infinite Jest. I mean, that one
Did you finish it?
Oh yeah, big time. I was obsessed with it. I ran through it, and I that was probably one of my favorite reading experiences in my life. So I'm definitely not like, I'm open to the challenging, long.
Matt loves like things that are very difficult to read.
I was reading this. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
Yeah. I was reading some philosophy stuff that just was so dense, but there was something almost like therapeutic about, even if I didn't fully like grasp what the full meaning of the text was, it was just, I don't know. I think there is something nice about reading things just for like how the words go together, even if you're not totally understanding everything immediately, you know.
That's like the nothingness
What's
book,
that?
the Sartre book.
Oh,
That's
okay.
like, this big, and I'll kind of
Oh, the one you were reading?
yeah, like I read the plays, and then that book is like impossibly dense, but I kind of just like opening it to a page, and he's always talking about nothingness, but there's like, could grab some wisdom.
Yeah, it almost becomes like reading poetry in a weird way where it doesn't have to there is meaning behind it, but even if there wasn't, there's just something beautiful about how the words, sound and go together.
And that's it for today's episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget my book, Desolation, a heavy metal memoir by Mark Morton with Ben Opapari, that is me, comes out June 25th on Hachette Books. Mark is a good friend of mine. He is one of the guitarists in the band Lamb of God, and this is his memoir. It's a damn good book, if I do say so myself. But again, that book is out June 25th on Hachette Books. You can pre-order it now everywhere, your favorite online bookstore. So be sure to do that. The site, Songwriters on Podcast, contains all of the archived episodes of the podcast. Of course, you can find them on all streaming platforms as well, but they're also on the site. I only have had the podcast for about I don't think even 2 years. Before that, all of the interviews were transcribed, and that took a lot of work. And that's why I started the podcast. So if you want to read the interviews that I did before the podcast, they are on Songwriters on Podcast as well. There are about 200 of them going back to 2010. So check those out. If you want to get a hold of me, Ben at songwritersonprocess.com, or fill out a form on the website. I'm here for your questions, your complaints, your concerns, or your interview suggestions. I'd love getting those as well. So hit me up. I will try to respond. So that's it, everyone. Have a great day and see you next time.